Welcome to the BLTnT podcast. I'm your host, Matt Loria, serving up real stories of business, life, technology, and transformations. You'll hear from interesting people about big changes from career shifts to life-altering decisions and the innovations that help make it all happen. It's about sharing those light bulb moments, pivot points, challenges overcome, and the journeys that inspire us to think differently. If you're on the lookout for insights to propel you forward, stories that resonate, or just a bit of inspiration on your next BLTnT move, you're in the right place. Let's dig in. All right, welcome to this episode of the BLTnT podcast, where I'm sitting with my friend Pete Thomas. How you doing, Pete?
Good to see you. Good to see you.
Pete is an author, a speaker, a coach, a former CEO, and you probably should know this, he's also a winner of the Biggest Loser.
Well, that sounds contradictory, but thank you.
He's not a loser.
Not a loser.
But he's the biggest loser, the winner of the Biggest Loser. So I'm glad you're here.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate it.
Thanks for being here with us.
Thank you for hosting me and just your whole team here. I really appreciate it. Thank you,
No
sir.
problem.
Absolutely.
No problem. And for anybody who can't see that I have this iPad here on my lap,
Yeah.
you're the first person who came with so many notes that I have to have them in front of me here, because you've got a whole curriculum here in front of me to,
Our curriculum,
to
really,
share. Yeah.
really, our curriculum. I call them reminders. You know, I'm of a certain age where I need reminders.
I needed to spell out a word. You know, so if you can readdress these
I'm older. That's what I'm older. That's what I'm spelling out.
So Pete and I are, I would say, newer friends.
Absolutely.
We've gotten to know each other over the last year here.
Yeah.
Pete is a Vistage chairperson, which, as many of you know, I'm involved in the Vistage group, the Vistage organization, where I'm a member and have been since, I think, 2008. I'm trying to do the math there.
Yeah.
And Pete is incubating a new group of business leaders. So the way that Vistage works is that if you're a new chairperson or a new group leader, you're going to start under a current group that's already well established and mature. So mature, I think, means old. So you're under our nice old group that we have, and he's incubating by bringing people along. So that as he grows his group, those people are finding the value of being as a part of a group. Even though the group is your group is still budding.
Absolutely.
So,
Absolutely.
And you've only got a few more spots to fill, which
That's
I've
right.
learned, which is amazing.
It
So,
is. And let me say thank you for your kindness and generosity. You know, as our members have joined, as you mentioned, we join in with your group. You've been very helpful, just really acclimating them and setting expectations for them, so our members know that they've got to come in, contribute, right, and look to grow. So I really appreciate.
yeah,
your
you're
help
welcome.
in that
You're
way.
welcome. Well, you've done a fantastic job of bringing the right people, I would say, into your group, which is always a value. You know,
Yeah.
it's probably a big temptation when you're getting started with something like this to say, you know, hi, I'm Pete, and whoever will talk back to you, you grab their credit card and have them join up into the group.
Right. Well, it's a good point. One of the things that I've said is when you have a group, right, a peer group, or an executive peer group of any type, the worst possible person to be in that group is a know-it-all, right? And the ideal person to join an executive peer group is someone that wants to grow, that wants to learn and develop. And executive peer groups of many types have been around forever, right? Remember when I was looking into this, going back and doing research, and Benjamin Franklin had something called the Junto, right? This was his peer group. They met for 38 years, right? And then you had Henry Ford and Firestone and Thomas Edison met on a regular basis, right? So these peer groups, there's nothing new about them. But it really does. You have to, as a leader, you have to have the correct demeanor. And that demeanor is, I want to learn, I want to grow, I don't know it all. And I know that if I'm around some others who are as least as sophisticated as I am, and if not higher, and that's what typically it is in a Vistage group, then I'm going to learn. And then I'm going to be able to go back and take that to my team, and I'm going to take that to everyone in my organization. So I appreciate you mentioning that, because that's the design of Vistage.
You're welcome. Let's actually back up just a little bit. I know I kind of started right out of the gate here talking about Vistage, almost as though people might know exactly what it is.
That's
And
good.
you've already alluded to that it's a peer organization
That's right.
for business leaders. But
That's
could you
right.
just give us a little bit more color
Absolutely.
on what it is, and then we'll talk about how we met.
Absolutely, how we got
had
here.
that fist fight in the parking lot, and then became best friends.
Absolutely. So Vistage, really, it's a peer group, but it's an invitation-only, private and confidential executive peer group. And so if you could imagine about 15 to 20 of your peers who are all in various types of business, right? They come together on a regular basis, and a couple of amazing things happen. I like to say, it all happens when the group meets, and that's what our marketing material says, right? But in those meetings, you have subject matter experts. A couple of months back, I was in a group, and the former CEO of Nabisco was there, right? And they come in, these subject matter experts come in and teach for a half a day. And then the second half of the day is what we call the executive session. That's where the executives that are in the room, they come in and they bring their biggest complication or biggest problem in business or biggest challenge, and the other members of the group end up helping them through the challenge. My job is to facilitate, because when you got a lot of smart, successful people in the room, what tends to happen is people will throw out suggestions after suggestions. That's not the way it's designed, right? What you really need to do is really need to understand the problem that executive is bringing to the room, understand that in depth. Is that really the problem? And then after we do a great deal of work, many times if it's related to financials, you're grilling that executive. Are you sure about those numbers, right? Are you sure that you're hitting your profit numbers? That looks off, right? And then after all of that, all the questioning, then comes the suggestions. And then that leader is held accountable to go back and do some work, because they're going to come back to the group as a whole and report on how well they've done, right? Or what the action that they took, did it result in the action that they wanted, right? But if you think about it, man, I like to say it like this: that time that the group just spent on your problem is probably the most expensive hour of advice you're ever going to get, and so. It is really an amazing place to be. It's amazing. When I was CEO, I was able to pull up my phone and ask certain people that were in my Rolodex for specific advice. But this is about intentional learning. I'm setting aside time to learn intentionally and to grow.
I never thought about it like that. About when we're internal here inside the company, and you have 4 or 5 people in a meeting, you start to think to yourself, boy, this is an expensive meeting. But
that's right.
When you think about being in a professional peer group with 15 CEOs or almost 20 CEOs in that room that we were in just last, that's an expensive group of advisors there,
Absolutely.
For you.
Absolutely.
So that is one of the more expensive things you can do, especially when all the attention is focused on you.
On you.
Right?
That's right.
And to solve your problem that you're bringing.
Absolutely. And it's expensive, not just if you think about, if you break down the salary per hour of each executive, but if you think about the number of years of experience that are in the room, right? We've got some Vistage members that of course, that that have been in Vistage 29 years. You said that you've been in since when? 2008?
2008. I still can't do the math on it, but I've been there.
Right. And so the number of years, the depth of experience inside that room, it's absolutely amazing. It's a special place. It really is.
Well, that's the room that we met in. So we met in the room. It was down in Wyandotte, where one of our group members is actually transforming.
That's right.
We should give him a plug. Ron Thomas. Ron Thomas is transforming the city of Wyandotte.
Absolutely.
So any of you are watching or listening in Michigan, you should go visit. But the group was hosted there. We had a speaker who actually was a guest on the BLTnT podcast, Andre Van Hall, and his Seeing Eye Dog.
That's right.
Were there, and here's this guy Pete. First time I ever see him. I'm looking across the table. I came in late, a couple minutes late, just truth be told, so I didn't hear his introduction. So I'm thinking, oh, he must be a new member, or maybe somebody's courting him to be a member. And then And when I see somebody new in the room, I get a little skeptical, right? How much should I be divulging? What should I be sharing with this person?
That's right.
And it was by way of your demeanor and your questions and your interactions that I started to instantly give you authority or credit, I would say, of like, I want to get to know this guy. And where it really was in that executive session that you were mentioning. We were helping one of the other members through an issue, and the group was getting a little bit eager to be delivering solutions versus asking more questions and understanding. And so I was getting a little bit vocal about that, and then Pete spoke up, and I thought, oh, this guy he talks pretty slick. He's probably going to be giving advice, and he just nailed with some great questions and never went into the never assumptive in any way, which is where I was like, oh boy, I got to get to know this guy, because that we all know what assume spells, right?
Come on, that's right.
So,
that's right, absolutely.
And when you weren't doing that, that really gave me some confidence that, hey, this guy might be the real deal.
Right. Well, and what you're talking about is that Socratic questioning. It's one thing if you're a leader and someone tells you what your solution is, right? But it's a whole different thing if they ask questions in a way that the solution bubbles up in your mind. Right? And I think in that particular case, it was obvious amongst the other executives that the particular executive that we were dealing with, his issue, that he needed to grow as a leader. I think that was pretty obvious. But it's one thing when someone tells you, you need to grow as a leader, right? You're going to automatically get defensive.
Absolutely.
But with the questions, if you can formulate the questions in such a way that they see their own blind spots, right? Then it's like, oh, I need to go read some books. I need to go talk to more. I have to improve. And that's really the goal of the structure of Vistage. It's one of the things that we say is we question your answers, right? And so you were right on. You were trying to get the group to stick to the format, right, which is where you're inquisitive enough to truly understand before we get into the questions. And I was new, so I wasn't trying to jump in or anything, but that's just the way that I think. I know that I'm surrounded by people. If I've met some amazing leaders, right, and I met a leader and her company. They do balancing. So when you're, if a part comes off the line, right, it connects to her equipment and it's balancing out the manufacturing. I don't have to know everything about that. However, I know enough about business to know that I can ask you certain questions to where the answers bubble up inside you. And that's really my goal. Put great people in the room together, right? Make sure that we facilitate the meetings in such a way that the executives leave. Well, I'll tell you this is what I call a testimony. One of my members said, Pete, to be pragmatic about it, I've received the entire value of my Vistage membership in just these first 3 months.
Wow.
Right? And so that I feel like, okay, that means I'm doing my job, because that leader is able to take real information and take it back to his group or take it back to his company and impact his company positively. So that's what we're trying to do.
That's great.
Yeah.
So after we met there, we then decided to get together for dinner.
Absolutely.
And chat. And boy, some of the stories there really resonated. These are things maybe Pete wouldn't say about himself, but I'm going to make sure that
not at all.
Give a little color into Pete. But well, I'm going to jump right to it. We talked about the fact that you actually, not only did you help a homeless person.
Oh my goodness, you're going there.
I'm going there. I'm surprising you with this. But you actually let him live with you.
Yeah. So now
you are a walk the walk, talk the talk.
Yeah, I try to be. I was so usually, there's this concept of let the right hand know what the left hand is doing, right? But this is to me, I believe that this is a general principle. What I've learned over time is that I have this ability to overcome difficulties and obstacles. And so in 2023, I had resigned from my company. I was a CEO of a family-owned business, right? And we were preparing the prior 2 years to exit the company, right? We wanted to sell the company. The leadership was not ready to take it over, and we had done a lot of work in 2 years. But there was just certain reasons. I was like, we're not right there, and you're not ready to make the jump. So I resigned. And then I was engaged, right? And that engagement ended. And then I did something. I'm like, I don't know if I should have done it at this age. I applied to Harvard Business School online, right? And was accepted. And I'm taking 3 killer courses: accounting and finance, statistics, and economics, right? So this is not a good year, man.
I would have paid to get out of those
Thank
classes.
you.
You're paying to get in.
So in my mind, there were 2 principles. Number 1, if I'm in the middle of a difficulty, I need to challenge myself. And come leaving the company and leaving the relationship, I need to challenge myself. So what do? I challenge myself in something I'm not strong at, right? But then along the way, the other principle that I've always believed is when you're in a difficult situation, help somebody out who is in a more difficult situation. And I'm going to the gym one Saturday morning, right? And I'm like, woe is me. I'm feeling down in the dumps. I got to go home and study this accounting, right? And I see a guy who's walking in the middle of the summer in July with a cane in one hand and a battery in the other. I'm like, well, you don't see this every day. Just you don't. And so I swing around.
That's the newest of the EVs.
That's right. Self EV. Exactly right. Exactly. And so I swing around to help the new EV guy. And I said, do you need some help? And anyway, I take him down to the local auto parts place to plug the battery up. And then in the meantime, I take him across the street to get a meal. And it's during that time across the street, right, is where we start developing a relationship. And I learn his story. He had moved over from Romulus to Ann Arbor and to find a job. He was living out of his car. His car was parked behind the Planet Fitness, but he had MS. So in my mind, I'm thinking this is going to make this job search really hard. He's struggling to eat, and his hand is shaking. And then he says this, Matt. He says, I've got to get a job quickly because I want to go into real estate, because I passed a bridge and I saw people under the bridge and I don't want to be there. But he's saying it and his voice is shaking. Now, Matt, that was my key to kind of dig in on that. Because as a guy, you're right, we can be abrupt, and I was going to be abrupt with him. And I said, look, let me explain something to you. You're going to be under that bridge. It's July. You're doing this by yourself. You have no family here. It's just in a matter of months you're going to be under that bridge, like we talked it out. Your car doesn't have tags on it. One day you're going to come out of the shower at Planet Fitness, that car's going to be gone. So let me help you out, right? And so now, again, we don't know each other, so he's got to establish a relationship. And in Ann Arbor, there are great resources for homeless and all of this type of thing. But eventually, I had an extra room. I knew that he was going to need that room. Right. And so eventually I let him move in. I had to coerce him. It's December, January, Matt. And I'm like, it's getting kind of cold out there. If you want me to come get you tonight, I'll come. So I would come get him for one night. Right. And then the next night he tried to stay in his car. And then one day he was like, do you mind if I stay till the spring? And I'm like, not at all. And that's 18 months ago. Right. Wow. And the great thing is we were able to get him some resources, getting some help, get him to the doctor and all that kind of stuff. But, and I don't want to sound selfish, but I was in a bad place. Mm-hmm. And so I'm helping out somebody who's even worse. And that just that levels your own emotional state, sure. Right? It's like, okay, things are not the way that I was planning them out, but I'm not that bad, right? And that also, we talked about this, that led to a missions trip in Gambia this year where, you're in the 172nd poorest country out of 185. Wow. It provides perspective, right? You realize, man, it's not that bad to be in traffic. It's not that bad to deal with potholes and all of these other things, Like, I live in a great place. And so I just believe that adds perspective to our lives.
That's great.
Helping others.
I'm glad I surprised you with that, because I
threw me off with that one.
You didn't have that in your
not at all
in your note cards here.
In my 7 pages, I don't have that in there at all.
So and we will get to your 7 pages here, because you do have seven secrets of a great leader, of great leaders that you want to make sure that we maybe touch on a little bit here would be great. But let's talk about your career. So you mentioned that you. Let's bring us up all the way from birth, I guess, to career here. There's some interesting things that come along in here. This is, again, dinner conversation that we're kind of bringing out to the rest of the people was, I don't know if I mentioned something about foster care. I don't remember if you started it, but you told me your story of how you grew up. Yeah. And
well, you're a great interviewer, so you likely were digging it out of me at dinner. That's probably what it was.
You think so?
I think so. I think so. You were trying to, who is this guy?
I learned those questions in Vistage.
That's right, exactly right. Who is this guy? Let me check him out. And so, I like to say it like this. I grew up with the whole sad story. And so I won't bring the audience down by taking it down. But my mother struggled with mental illness. It was a combination of paranoia and dementia. And she had it really, really rough. So much so that she thought that people were coming to get me or get her kids. She thought that constantly. So in my earlier years, I was on the go. I lived in about 13 different cities by the time I was 12 or 13 years old. And that means moving from Cleveland, Ohio, Shaker Heights, Ohio, Pontiac, Detroit, and then to the East Coast, Washington, D.C., Arlington, Virginia, Norfolk, Virginia, just lived all over the place because mom was on the go with me. And what that meant is that many times I was in or out of foster home or foster care. And there were times where when I was in foster care, because she had left, someone would call protective services, whatever it is, for that day, and I would be in foster care, and then she would come to her right mind, and she would then call social services to find out where I was, and then she would then go back and literally abduct me from foster care. So the very first time that she left for any period of time, I was just old enough to tie my shoe, and she leaves for 2 weeks. And during that time, she tells me go around to the neighbor's house and eat at my neighbor's house. So that's what I do, and then I come back and play by myself. If any of our audience members remember the old green machine big wheel, right?
Oh, yeah.
This is what I had and what I played with every day for a couple of weeks. And when she comes back, she's got my sister. Now, my sister, she wasn't the type to rub her belly and say, hey, I'm having a baby. So I didn't know that my sister was due or on the way, but I knew that I had a sister. Within about a year and a half, 2 years from that point, we had moved to Detroit, and my mom leaves again. This time when she leaves, I'm taking care of my sister, right? I'm taking care of my sister, and she leaves again and teaches me how to cook pork and beans and hot dogs, right? But I've got to take care of my sister every single day, but then the food runs out. And what do you do when you're like 6 years old, right? 6 or 7 years old, the food runs out, you got to take care of your little sister. Well, I packed my little sister up in the middle of the winter, and we go out the back door and we start knocking on doors for food, right? Thankfully, the goodness in humans comes out immediately. The first family that took us in, they weren't, Jeffrey Dahmer wasn't there, right? Takes us in, feeds us, and then takes us to the local police station. My sister, that's our first entrance way into the foster care system, but that was many years of that. And then my sister and I, we were separated. We were separated because my mom abducted me from the foster home that we were both in. And so it took me 48 years to reunite with her, which is a whole nother story, right? It was just an amazing experience. But what that does for you, right, is through your life, it's really difficult to bother me now because I've gone through so much when I was younger, and it's really difficult to get me down. And I mentioned the time, that was, but I'm not down too often, and because I went
not
through
for too long either.
That's right, and because I went through a lot when I was younger, so anytime there's food around, you know what I mean, I'm going to be okay. We got home.
So resiliency and perspective, I think, are your
absolutely right.
Couple of your strong suits,
and that's also what attracts me to business owners, executives, CEOs, that resiliency piece. Even myself personally, I think there's different characteristics of an executive leader when you've led your company through COVID, right? If you had to lead I remember waking up in the middle of COVID thinking to myself, if I don't sell 3 systems, it was a software company, right? We sold software and hardware together. If I don't sell 3 systems this week, the owner's sons will not be able to pay their mortgage. And that kind of pressure comes on you. And what do? Well, most leaders perform, right? And I sold 3 systems that week, right? And so that particular year during COVID, we had the best year in our company's history.
Great.
The team developed a strategy to do the installations when transportation was shut down. But at the tip of the spear was the sales strategy, which I developed by the grace of God, right, where the team came together. And so that resiliency, in my mind, a lot of that is based in how I grew up, right? I can remember us taking a bus trip to Norfolk, Virginia, my mom and I. Right? Now, again, she's struggling mentally. We're going to Norfolk not for any reason, and we end up sleeping in the Greyhound bus station, right? So if you can overcome that, I can overcome COVID, So
nice. That's a great attitude.
It's been an interesting journey for sure.
This episode of the BLTnT podcast is sponsored by Auxium, business IT and cybersecurity designed to outsmart chaos. And powered by Juniper Networks. Automate your network with Juniper Networks and the Mist AI platform, the world's first AI-driven wired and wireless network. So here you are now. You've done a fair bit of coaching.
That's right.
Already.
Absolutely.
But you've chosen to join in with Vistage, Michigan.
Yes.
Because it has a structure to it in
100%.
place and a
Absolutely.
support network in place and a kind of a tried and true methodology. I know we talked about a little bit.
Absolutely.
But you've kind of got your own 7 secrets of great leaders.
That's right.
And,
That's right.
And I know that really fits into kind of everything here. I mean, certainly we're already hitting on a lot of the BLTnT here with
That's
the
right.
business, life, technology, and
transformation.
transformations. I think we've already talked about a few for you here, but you want to talk about these? You want to go over some of these? We can go over all 7.
Whatever you say.
Let's do it.
Well, the first thing is you mentioned the tried and true model. Like Vistage was started back in '65 in Milwaukee when a group of executive leaders came together and said, we're all dealing with certain things collectively. Let's get together and let's talk about these things. And Vistage has an amazing model. As you mentioned, I've done training, gone across the country, done leadership and development and all of those different things. But the model of Vistage is unlike any other model I've seen, right? And a part of the reason that I love it so is because of what we talked about, that executive processes, the executive sessions, it's just really amazing. And what I've recognized over my years of traveling is that there are certain what I call secrets of a great leader. I think that anybody that has some followers, you can be a leader, right? But if you don't have a couple of things, the foundational things, which are character and competence, right? Those are foundation. We don't even talk about those because you need both of those. But then on top of that, great leaders are visionary, right? And I say it's 2 types of vision, Matt. Either you see something where nothing exists, or you see something and figure out how to optimize it. So at my software company, the owner, he saw windows, right? Blank windows in real estate offices. And he said, well, why are people scotch taping listings to the window? And what that ended up turning into was that it turned into a touch screen system where there's no technology on the outside, but when you walk up to the window, you can touch the window and it would bring up real estate listings. It would work through the glass. So he saw something where nothing existed. Right? I don't have that ability, right? But if there's something up there, I can optimize it. So as a CEO, right, I can say, okay, we need to optimize the pricing. We need to bring the marketing team on, right? So, but a great leader is visionary, I think, in some way. Do you think that that's true in your experience?
Oh, yeah, definitely. I mean, the only reason I'm in the business that I'm in of technology services and cybersecurity is because my brother and I were in business together in a previous company, and we had a great service provider. They sold to a nationwide firm, so that whole everything changes when when new ownership comes into play. Right. No matter what the people part of it was, it really changed dramatically, and so. We really struggled to find good support there for our mid-sized company, and so I said, I'm just going to start my own after a few more failed attempts of finding the right partner, and so.
So that's what I mean.
It's not like I was recreating the wheel. I mean,
right.
In terms of nobody's ever done this before. Now, what we did do though is we did see that when we got into the business that in our industry at the time. There was a lot of standardization missing. There was a lot of security missing.
Yes.
At the time I had started the company with my old partner, I was renovating a house, major stud down renovation, double the size of the house. Never do it again, I said, but then now I'm doing it again. But you get exposed all of a sudden. I had never done that before, but you get exposed to electricians and to the electrical code and to the electrical permit and all those things. And there's standardization. There's training that these people go through. What I realized in the IT world is that anybody can hang up their shingle and say IT expert.
That's right.
And they might be an expert.
That's right.
But are they an expert at scale? Are they able to do this for multiple people at scale with a level of competency, with a level of quality that people come to expect? So
that's good.
So yeah, I think you're right. They don't have to. It doesn't have to be that everything's what do they call it? Red ocean, blue ocean. That one book. Yeah. It doesn't have to be uncharted territory, but
And I mean, one of the things that I even pick up from what you were sharing there, the integrating this learning, right? You're pulling in something from an unrelated area, right? When you're looking at the building a house and those standards, and you bring that over into business, right? That to me is also a visionary skill, because not everybody can do that. Not everyone has that ability. Something's gonna come to me. I remember hearing this conversation recently about somebody bringing something from another area. Well, you had, was it Anthony Lavalde on?
Anthony Laverde, CEO
right?
at Imagine Theater.
Now, he's Imagine Theaters, but what he's doing is he's bringing things over from other parts of the entertainment world, setting up podcast studios, right, where they're going to have audience members, right, who and set up a ticketing system so that the podcasters or the influencers are able to generate revenue, not just from YouTube streaming and all that, but from having an in-person audience.
Right.
So that ability as a visionary to bring different things in, right, I think that's a unique thing with the leaders.
Yeah,
that's unique.
definitely.
Another one, well, I mean, I've always, for a popular standpoint would be Elon Musk, right? So he's on the one side, he would see things that weren't there, and then the other side is just improve things. I mean, you have to recognize that Elon is a gentleman who said he's going to build an electric car company when the big three couldn't do it successfully. And he's going to, at the same time, he's going to build a rocket that goes to space, comes back, and is reusable. And he's going to do it at the same time, right? And so that visionary aspect, to me, is just, it's an amazing part of a great leader, great leader. Want me to go to the next one?
Yeah, let's go number two.
Okay, number two, I think great leaders lead, they take action from the front. In other words, as a leader, you're going to put the vision out there, but then you have to turn around. You're going to have to raise capital, right? You're going to have to convince your team in the direction you're going. One of my examples was in the Ann Arbor area, there was a roofing company called Mr. Roof. They had a little jingle, 1-800 call Mr. Roof, right? And Kurt Greaves was the CEO's name. We had a chance to sit down, and every time I sit down, I'm interrogating. I want to know, like, what were the critical times in your career? And there was a critical time in his career where they were shifting from one type of shingle to another type. But his salespeople didn't want to make the shift. And he talked about, he went to his salespeople and he said, there is no going back. If this does not work within 90 days, the company is going under. And he shut off all opportunity to buy the old shingles, right? But that's leadership. That's risking the entire company on this idea. Right, and that's happened multiple times throughout businesses where you've got to lead from the front.
I just read a post from Mike Morse, the Mike Morse Law Firm.
Absolutely.
And he was talking about how he had most of his business, and this wasn't that many years ago. I want to say he said 10 or 13 years ago or something. He was not a widely known personality.
That's right.
And or that his company wasn't even widely known. He said 70% of his business was coming from one referral source of an attorney, and that got shut off in a day.
Wow.
Or a month or whatever it was, some short period of time. And and Mike had 35 employees at the time, and he said, if I don't do the right thing here, I'm going to have 5, real soon. So, he said I looked at the market and said, okay, there's this other guy. Right, Sam.
Yes.
He didn't mention him by name, but I think he was mentioning Sam.
Bernstein.
Sam
That's
Bernstein.
Right. That's right.
And he's saying this guy's spending $20 million a year on marketing. But I got to at least do something.
That's
so he
right.
went out and he started to market himself.
Wait, now let me understand this. He lost his main referral source and decides to double, triple, quadruple down on advertising.
Yeah.
That's a leader.
Yeah.
I mean, what?
I'm like,
just to come up with that.
That's taking action. I mean,
That
that
is.
is like, and it's also the resiliency, the perseverance.
That's right. That's right.
It's going to happen. It's going to happen.
Going for
it's going to
it,
happen.
and it's
somehow.
going to happen.
Right?
And that was one of the big things that I learned, and I struggled with that early on. But when I grasped that lesson, that was the key to my own personal development. It's like, leaders do not believe that any challenge is going to sink them. Right? You're just that resiliency you're talking. You're going to figure it out. Now let's go and get to figuring. You know what I mean? Absolutely. Next point that I wrote down here as we were talking about, great leaders gather great teammates. Right? They attract talented teammates. In EOS they talk about the integrator versus the visionary, or right person, right seat. But the vision, or Dan Sullivan talks about who, not how, right? But if you're a visionary, a great leader, you're going to attract people to the vision. You have to attract the right people because typically as a visionary, your vision is much too broad to handle the day-to-day stuff. I was sharing with someone, back to Elon Musk, with all the different businesses that he has, what really is the critical key for him is he's got this suite, a lot of them are ladies, right? This suite of COOs or integrators who will take his idea and actually get the work done, who deal with the employees and all that. Because if you follow him at all, he's all over the place with these amazing ideas. But you have to have critical people on your team that help you to accomplish these great things.
We actually, our vision that we set here is to create a company that is that lives beyond its founders.
That's good.
And that's a destination company for employees and for clients. And so I always say, remember back in the day when you could go work a whole career at General Motors. You could start off in engineering and go to college for engineering, spend your whole career on the engineering track, and know that you could retire from that one place. Or same thing on the line. You could start on the line and you can retire very nicely after working a whole career there. But one of the other attributes was that when somebody would get that job at GM, their buddy would be saying, "Hey, can you get me in? Can you get me in?" And I said, that's one of the ways that I'm going to know that we've achieved success here.
That's good.
Is when the employees are saying, their friends are saying to them, "Hey, can you get me in?"
That's
right.
Good.
And we have a little bit of it today, right? We've got a lot of people who have brought their friends into our organization, which is an honor and means we're doing something right. But I want that to be the overarching way that we're always attracting the best talent and the best clients too.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right?
Let me do a shameless callback, right, to Vistage. One, I remember when I recognized the power of the group and of the room. I'm attending one of the chairs meetings, and at 8 o'clock is when everybody starts. 8:30 is really when it kicks off. The Vistage chair gets a phone call at 8:25. It's from a member who could not make it in that day, and that member was calling because she was actively going through a medical procedure. I don't want to share too much. We anonymize all of that, so you don't say too much. Actively going through a medical issue at that moment, Matt, at that moment. But the reason she called in is because she wanted the people in the room, the other executives in the room, who care about her and who she cares about, she wanted them to know what was going on. Like, that says something, right? That says something about the type of people that are in the room, and also says something about that Vistage chair, the type of people that you attract. And so it's absolutely critical, those teammates that you have around you. Just critical.
That's great. That's great.
Now, here's one of the things, my one caveat to that, right? You cannot attract what you do not model, right? You can't attract what you do not model. So great leaders, in my mind, lead themselves first, right? You triggered Lencioni's quote, right? When you talked about that, what was it?
I think I say it every day.
Come on.
The ideal team player is humble, hungry, and smart.
3 things, right? Absolutely.
Because I can't remember the rest of
That's
them.
right. But I mean, that just, and you have to be that as the leader, right? You have to model that. And so great leaders lead themselves first. The thing that you mentioned before was about my experiences in growing up, right? When people hear the story, and I didn't look at it myself, but when people hear the story, what they see in that story is what you shared, resilience, right? I'm just going through life. I'm not going to give up. I'm going to find a solution. And I didn't know that these were characteristics of leaders all around, because when I was growing up, I didn't have leaders all around. I didn't have a dad and didn't have all of this stuff. And they're like, oh, there are commonalities amongst great leaders. And leading yourself first, having this mindset, we're going to accomplish great things, right? I'm going to be humble, hungry. We're going after this, right? And smart, whether it be I'm going to be intelligent myself or surround myself with smart people. It's just, I think it's critical.
Well, with the whole the great leaders lead themselves first. Do you remember Zig Ziglar?
Come on.
Would talk about he was very overweight.
Yes.
And he said he wanted to be a coach.
That's
and
right.
He said,
That's right.
Nobody's going to believe me if they don't think that I can take care of myself. And so what he started doing was
jogging across the University of Texas College campus.
Yep. But he did it one mailbox at a time.
And
he did it at night because he was embarrassed.
That's right. Before
how
that,
he looked. So he said he went one mailbox at a time. First night was one mailbox. Second night was 2 mailboxes. So so you're kind of in that same category.
Absolutely.
I mean, So the Biggest Loser. Let's
Yes.
talk about the experience there.
I forgot. We haven't talked about that.
Well,
Oh,
not
my
exactly.
goodness.
I mean, because also it has a resiliency
Yes.
story to it too.
That's
It wasn't like it was just Pete showed up, slam dunk, won the thing.
Oh my goodness, you're a very good point. So one of the problems that came about from my time with my mom is an eating disorder, lack of a better way to describe it. Did not learn proper eating habits. Right, I lived one particular time. This just exemplifies how difficult her situation was. We were living in East Lansing, Michigan. I live in Ann Arbor, so I don't like to say the college.
That's okay.
Okay, thank you. So we're living in East Lansing, Michigan off of Grand River. And at this particular location, we have a box spring and a mattress, or box spring and a mattress in the house. Mom puts the box spring against the window to block the rays that are coming in because she thinks that somebody's scanning the house. She also puts aluminum foil around the top of the window to block the rays. We would go down to the Catholic Church. I recently went back there to St. Mark's, or I think St. John the Evangelist Catholic Church. They had a food bank, but the food bank was not, we couldn't get the food from the food bank because in that location that we were living, we had electricity but no gas, so we couldn't cook anything. We were going to the Catholic Church to get the church bulletins because in the church bulletins were 2-for-1 coupons for Burger King. Whopper Burger King, and there was a Burger King right next to the house. So I learned at an early age how to eat fast food, right? And so when you have the fats combined with the salts and the carbohydrates, it just throws your diet off. But more importantly, we weren't eating every day. So I like to ask this question, right? Food is not available every one particular time. I remember we went on a fast, right? We went on a fast for a week. And it wasn't until I'm in my mid-20s, I was like, wait a minute. That wasn't a spiritual thing. We didn't have no money. We were broke. But at that particular time, I'm not eating every day. So when you don't eat every day, how do you think I would eat when food became available?
Like it was never going to be available again.
Ever again. So I learned this habit of overeating, even when I ended up in foster care or whatever, where the food was normalized, right? And what that led to was eating habits that were just horrible. And one time I was over 416 pounds. Now, again, always having this mindset of, I'm going to get this weight off. But this has something to do with your conversation. I can remember being in a men's Bible study when I was around 25, and I said, well, if I'm this big when I'm 30, I'm going to do something about it, right? Of course, when I was 30, I was that and worse. But then this television show comes along called The Biggest Loser, and I remember my first thought was, who the heck gets on this kind of TV show? Real people don't get on here, right? End up applying. I'll make the story shorter from there. I apply, make it on the show, lose 83 pounds in 62 days while on the show.
Under Jillian Michaels.
Under my trainer, Jillian Michaels, she was a savant. So this was like an answer to prayer because she was amazing. And then once I was voted off the show, because I was voted off after 62 days, I'm living in the Ann Arbor area. I'm running every single day. I'm working out 2.5 hours a day. At the time, we're doing real estate investing, so I could adjust and shift my schedule. And I lose 102 pounds at home. So I go back to the show's live finale in November of that year, having lost 185 pounds total. And I win what's called the at-home prize.
Wow!
So it was an amazing experience.
And you've kept it off.
Kept it off until 2018. In 2018, went through this medical issue, drinking contaminated water and all that. It was crazy. That was a crazy time. But here's the interesting thing. That Zig Ziglar story that you're talking about, he told the story of after he ran from mailbox to mailbox and improved. He tells the story of running across the University of Texas campus, right? And he said that he realized when he had become a runner because he actually enjoyed running across the campus. When he first started, he was like, why are these people running and smiling, right? And I have that in my mind while I'm running across the diag at University of Michigan's campus. And I can remember when I got that feeling, wow. That was a sense of accomplishment, right? And ran an hour last night, even though I'm still recovering from that contaminated water and all that. Ran for an hour last night on campus, right? So it was. It's been an incredible journey.
That's
an incredible journey. Yeah,
that's
it's
awesome.
been
I mean, I think that hits the your number 5 here.
Yeah.
Too. I mean, it's kind of right in line with all of this. So.
Great leaders grow. You're saying that I grew intentionally. I gained weight.
Yeah, you grew intentionally. Yeah,
absolutely.
I'm going to say that you pursued personal growth and development.
I think that's
what I'm going to say.
That's right. Absolutely, absolutely. And so, why did you join Vistage?
I joined Vistage. Actually, my brother was a member before me.
Okay,
And he was, his chairperson was a fellow who's since passed away, Larry Short.
Okay.
And Larry sold his business back in the 90s for oodles and oodles of money and had
Yes.
no need to work,
That's
to
good.
continue to work.
Yeah.
But he loved pouring into people. And the
Yeah.
growth that I was seeing in my brother and the changes and the different perspectives that he was learning,
good.
I said, I gotta get on this bandwagon.
Come on.
So,
Absolutely right.
so then Larry introduced me to Bob Holland,
Yep.
who's my chairperson,
Absolutely.
and that's how I got in.
That's beautiful. And so, and that has to be intentional, right? You have to intentionally want to grow. You have to intentionally take the time and say, I am going to grow. I'm going to develop. Like I think I pulled up notes here on Tuesday. I'm in a session and we're learning about Pat Lencioni's his working genius model, right? And so you want to, as a leader, I don't believe that you can lead properly if you're not trying to intentionally grow. And
Well, I think sometimes when we look at why does somebody join a group like
That's right.
Vistage, right? Or a Bible study or
That's
a
right.
whatever. I mean,
Whatever.
whenever they seek the help of others,
yes,
sometimes it might even it feels unintentional or
That's
it
good.
feels like there's some divine intervention that maybe brings this along.
that's good.
But that's only part of it, right?
Come on.
Is that you have to have the openness to, even if you don't know that you can admit it, you got to be able to admit that you have
Thank
a
you.
weakness or a problem
Thank
or
you.
something that you can seek out. And I think we watch this.
That's right.
When new members come into groups like this, where there's a wall put up
That's good.
initially,
That's good.
right? And it takes one or two or maybe three sessions all of a sudden before it's like, oh yeah, I got problems too. And you're like, oh wait a second, I thought you were perfect, and then they really start doing the work.
That's
and,
right. That's right.
But that's that imposter syndrome,
Come
right? That
on.
we all fall into.
That's
and,
right. That's
and
right.
we know when the wall is up, and
100%.
we can't hide from it. So
We can't. And you're right on target with that. Interestingly enough, I was talking to a gentleman yesterday who was referred to me to have a conversation about Vistage. And I was impressed. He's young, but the first thing he says is, I need to grow. He said, I'm strong in this area, but I'm weak in that area. And I just know I need help with this. And I was referred to you. And that's critical. I call it self-awareness, right? I know what I'm good at. There's also these levels of competency that you could talk about, right? But knowing the areas that you're not strong in and being intentional about trying to go and develop yourself in that area. To me, that's critical as a leader.
I think what's interesting too is when you're dealing with people who have been there, done that. Whether it's you on the personal struggles or like a Bob Holland with some of his business struggles, or you with your business struggles, or just
Yes.
other members. And I can think back to things that I brought to the group 5 and 10 years ago
Yes.
that I thought were insurmountable.
Come on.
Right. And
Come
I'm
on.
watching the face of the other guy and I'm going, he doesn't look like this is that big of a problem. And then, you fast forward 5 or 10 years, you look back, you go, that wasn't that big of a problem.
That's right, that's
And if the next person brought me that one, I'd say it's not that big of a problem.
We're going to work through it. That's
Yeah.
exactly right. But that is, I think that's also the critical piece, right? Being able to work through it. First of all, being able to feel vulnerable enough to bring it to somebody, to bring it to a group. And not just a board of directors, right? Where you're going to reach out to them either on a quarterly basis or when you need some help, but intentionally on a regular basis, such as in our Vistage meeting. The other thing is association meetings. Many of our members are already members of associations, but those are scheduled, quarterly or biannually or whatever, and somebody else sets the agenda, where in our meetings, your chair typically sets the agenda, and it really is about you intentionally growing.
Well, I think the other groups out there too. I mean, many groups are network related,
That's right.
which we all need our network to
We
be
do.
strong. I mean,
That's right. Absolutely.
I mean, there's no question about that.
Yeah.
But the fact that there's not really a bias towards that in those meetings. It's really
right.
it's really learning. It's really growing.
That's right. Absolutely.
That's what we're trying to
Absolutely.
accomplish.
Well, the other side is you have a chair, such as myself, and my goal is to spend as much time as possible going out and just learning as much about all the new things that are out there, speaking to members such as yourself. What are you using in your business so that we can potentially bring it back to the group? Because when you think about it, there's tons of different assessment. You get Acumax assessment, Myers-Briggs, EOS. There's Rockefeller habits for scaling up, small giants, right? Open book management, Dan Sullivan's. There are all of these different things that are out there to help you with your business. But which one will really help you, right? And you need a group to be able to talk to someone. Hey, I'm in a service-based business. What are you using in your group to take care of your customers? What are you know, there's just nothing quite like this to be able to help you. I call it a cheat code, Matt. It really is a cheat code for helping you with your business. So let me ask you one of those cheat code kind of questions for the whole audience. We talked about this on a prior episode slightly. You talked about it slightly. But how do you manage accountability in a hybrid environment, hybrid work environment? I know you shared a little bit that you're bringing on some hybrid workers or workers that were out of state, if I remember that. So how do you manage accountability in that environment?
Yeah, well, KPIs obviously.
Come on.
But technology, we have technology that manages some of that, but also just the relationship that you're forming with the folks.
Good.
The relationship for us is, if we can't find that the person is able to contribute to culture, we know that it's not working. So there's some measurements, but then there's some also some feel behind it, right?
Yeah.
And so we've been very fortunate with the folks that we have that are out of state and have had good performance there, and it's working well. The most challenging thing, I think, is the flexible schedules, right? And going, okay, is Pete going to be in today? Is he not going to be in today? So we actually have a piece of software that overlays on Microsoft Teams that tells us that. And so it's much easier when we're using that technology to know where people are.
That's good.
So we don't do a couple of laps around the office looking for, is Pete here? We can just click right in. It's called Crewwho, and we're able to, I'm sorry, it's not called Crewwho. It's called Hybrid Healthy.
Okay.
Hybrid Healthy is the name
of
of the product that overlays over Microsoft Teams. So there's that.
Huge.
But Crewwho is another piece of technology that we use, and that is helping to incentivize the employees in different ways and give them feedback and that's one of those feedback mechanisms from our clients.
That's good.
That they use as well. So all of those things together, I mean, that's how we do it. Is it easy? Not always.
That's good.
And it's funny. There's what we've also found is that the more comfortable that an employee gets, is that they're then able to kind of come to their own realization of things. We've actually had employees say, you know what, I'm not good at working at home.
That's good.
I want to be in the office every day.
Right, absolutely.
And so when you hear somebody say that, okay, let's find a way to accommodate that.
That's good. And so this is this type of advice to me is one of the critical pieces about having a peer group, right? To be able to come in and have these conversations or to develop the relationships and say, Matt, know you're running a service-based business. Let's go out and grab a meal together because I'm struggling in this area. So thank you for sharing that.
Well, and I think what we find too is the blend of all the different types of businesses that we get to interact with.
Yes.
So we learn things from people in different industries all the time.
That's right.
And so it's not always that another IT guy, tells me something that helps me learn how to manage my business different. Sometimes it's the real estate guy.
That's right.
Or it's
Absolutely.
the lawyer, or it's somebody different like that.
Absolutely. And that's what I put down is, it's kind of a sub point, but as a part of growing intentionally is learning lessons from others. I have always had an executive coach. You mentioned Jillian Michaels, right, on The Biggest Loser, right? She was an amazing coach. But when I was CEO, I had an executive coach. And he helped me because it was a family-owned business, and this was something I was not accustomed to, right? We call them the cultural issues, right? But the challenges inside the family, it was. I can remember, Matt, one day going home on a Friday because the owner had challenged me not to challenge his son. Right, even though he had put me in this position because his challenging didn't work, right? And I remember that was like the worst weekend of my tenure. And thankfully, I had a session with my executive coach scheduled on that Monday, and he said, "Pete, you're taking on problems you should not be taking on." And he gave me a simple example of a tennis example. Every time a problem like that comes to your side of the net, you knock it right back and say, hey, I'm focused on these KPIs, right? We're focused on growth. You got to handle that because this is what we need to do. And it was like a huge relief, right? But it just speaks to the importance of having someone else that can speak into your life and that can encourage you.
Well, there's a Vistage expert speaker, Tom Foster, who talks about time span and
yes,
capacity to manage different time spans.
Excellent.
What your
He's
outlook
excellent.
is. But one thing he talks about is the as soon as it butts up to being or requiring a clinical psychologist, you need to bail out of that. That is not your realm of expertise.
That's
now, I'm
right.
sure there's a CEO or two or a coach or two out there that does have that.
Come on.
But if that's not your expertise, you need to tap out at those points.
Absolutely. And I mean, you mentioning him, and I remember listening to him, I think it was in December I heard him, and he was mind-blowingly excellent. He was just phenomenal. He was just absolutely phenomenal. All right, so what do you think? From you go to the next one?
I think you should, unless you
let's
want to
go.
talk about the 4 types of knowledge here.
I think we've covered a
you want
bunch
to share
of
that for a different. Well, we got to tease people for a different episode.
Yes.
Follow-up episode.
Okay, then all right, excellent. So I think we'll touch base on that. There are 4 types of competence or 4 types of knowledge, right? There's a conscious competence. This is, you know what you know, right? I know that wall, right, has black foam over it. You know what you do. And then there's unconscious competence, right? There are things that you do that you don't even think about. This gets into the realm of mastery, right? And we know, we can see this at times with athletes, we can see it with musicians, but everyday folks, everyday leaders. When you sit down and you have a conversation in an interview session, certain things just pop up in your head, and unconsciously yep, this person's going to be great, or no, this person won't fit the culture as you talked about, right? So that's the unconscious competence. And then the areas that are dangerous are the conscious incompetence. In other words, you know what you don't know. I do not know the distance from here to the moon in square feet, in miles. But I know I don't know that, which is okay. But then this area, I don't know what I don't know. Mm-hmm. And that's this not a gray area. It's this black, it's this unknown area. And you have to find it out. You have to find out what it is that you don't know. The best way to do that is to be around other leaders, be around other executive, other people of your peer group or above who have gone through different things. This is why when you brought this problem to the group and somebody was like, well, that's not that big a deal, right? Mm-hmm. Because to you, this was a big deal. But to them, they're like, you're going to get over that.
Well, they knew they lived through it on the other side.
Exactly right.
So I thought we were going to hold back on this and tease it for another episode.
That was the tease.
You just jumped right into it. We're going to dig deeper.
If you say that was the tease.
The next time.
I just did not follow your lead correctly. That's all that was.
That's okay. That's how we know it's not fully scripted, even though you gave me the script.
Yes, that's true. That is so true.
So Pete is organized. I think that's another thing we have here.
That's right.
He comes organized. He comes prepared. So number 6.
Number 6. This is almost the last one, right? But this is the semifinals. Great leaders overcome every single obstacle, right? Every single obstacle. I shared that, working. Well, I'll ask you, what was going through the pandemic like for you and your team?
Oh, at the beginning, I went into I don't know how they measure the DEF CONs, but I was in DEF CON, whatever the highest one was. I was in DEF CON. 1 to 5. I was in 5.
Yes.
Wait, which one? One is
no
one
5.
the top?
I think it's 5.
Okay, I was in
so.
the top one.
Yes.
And I just thought, oh my gosh, we've worked so hard to build this business, bring this team of people together. Oh my gosh, and it was all the what ifs and the toilet bowl of the what ifs of what's going to happen.
Yeah.
What if this does happen? How can we ever put this team back together, et cetera? And then the other thing is how the heck are we going to do this? We're all remote, and that, we, from a technology standpoint, it was a no-brainer. We were already there. We had the security, we had the technology. Everything was lined up for us. Our customers, they needed the help. So we were busy. But I was worried every day of what happens if our team gets sick? What happens if somebody passes away from this? It was just, it was a lot of pressure. And I ended up working more hours during COVID, and I had some medical issues during COVID
Yes,
that weren't
yes.
COVID related. It was the stress that was building up in the back of my head.
Wow.
Yeah, I thought I was having a stroke. I went to the ER, and then of course went through all the tests and everything, and they
Yeah,
said,
yeah.
there's these muscles back here, and when you're really
Wow.
stressed and tense, and the way I was sitting in my office chair,
Yeah.
it was all contributing to it.
Wow.
And so it affected my eyes, it affected my neck, it affected my head.
Amazing.
And so I took it hard at different times. That's for sure.
Absolutely.
But we thrived. I mean, we thrived. We gave a lot of clients discounts to try to help them through.
That's good.
We had a couple of people leave because they couldn't be out in public.
Absolutely.
Some people that were in the field.
Yeah,
But we overcame it, right? We just kept going. It was pivot.
That's right.
Whatever you got to do.
And that to me is the key word: overcome every obstacle. Right.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, there are a couple things that come to
I'm all
mind.
filled up on obstacles, by the way. I'd be okay if we just didn't have any for a while. That'd be just
Right.
fine.
Of course, hopefully that probably will never happen, right? But you've had a couple of other podcast guests on, right? Andre Van Hall, remember he went blind.
Oh yeah,
Come on.
So I mean, he's the guy. Anytime ever since I met him, anytime I have anything
Right.
going on, I think, you know what? The what if? Well, what if somebody told you you're going to be blind in 2
Come
weeks,
on.
fully blind? Because
Fully
by the way,
blind.
you woke up half blind today,
Yes,
and you're
yes.
going to be fully blind in 2 weeks.
Adjust from that, right?
Yeah.
Exactly. And then on the business side, right, when you had Ingmar on from Marlowe Beauty Supply,
Yeah.
what they decided in the middle of that, right, they worked with their attorney to make sure that they were a required business or whatever,
Yep.
and doubled down because their customers needed them, right? So they expanded their warehouse operations, right? It's those times where the obstacles present themselves that true leadership comes up.
Mm-hmm.
And I appreciate you sharing that even about your own health, because we have to make sure we're managing that in the middle of it.
Sure.
One of the things I learned from the health side of things, there's that fight, flight, or freeze response. And what you were going through is no different from the response that our ancestors would have felt if they went out to gather food and they had to fight off a lion.
Sure.
Right? That all of that testosterone, all of those hormones build up, but they would release it in the fight, right? Whereas it has to be an intentional release because
Sure.
this is all building up, and now it feels like a stroke. You have to take care of yourself as a leader. That's not even one of my 7 points, but it's absolutely critical. And a matter of fact, let me mention that. I had this thought in this conversation with someone recently, and this is why I'm in this space. Right, I have such an incredible love and respect for leaders and business owners because leaders such as yourself, right? You start businesses, you hire employees. Those employees are then able to go pay their mortgage, right? They're able to put their kids through college, right? If this did not exist, if businesses like yours did not exist, where would we be in general, just as a society? I was thinking about this. One of our local leaders, Dan Gilbert, had a health challenge here in the last few years, right? And someone asked me this question. They said, could you imagine if he had the health challenge 7 years prior? Now, he's critical to the revival of this entire area of Detroit, right? He bought several buildings, I think 14 buildings for a few $100 million downtown and strategically worked to bring the downtown area back. Can you imagine if he had a stroke or medical challenge 7 years prior and could not do that? Right? How long would it take for politicians to figure out a way to bring the city back? So business owners, right, such as those who come to Vistage, such as yourself, absolutely critical for society and proper functioning of our society. And so that's why I'm in this space, to serve. I know it's an overstated word, right, but to serve leaders to be their best selves because you're absolutely needed. So, if we need to get you a massage.
I'm all good now.
Oh, good.
now.
Excellent.
But you mentioned something there of maybe it's what you mentioned, maybe it's what you didn't mention. You mentioned the love of serving business leaders, and I will say that when I watch, over the years I've watched the other Vistage chairs and what they do, and Bob in particular, and now you have members all over the place. So
That's right.
this is
That's
not
right.
a phone it in sort of relationship that you have. You're
That's right.
driving from Ann Arbor to Port Huron
Yeah,
to
absolutely right.
Lansing to wherever,
right.
not East Lansing, but
That's right.
Lansing.
No,
You know, this is not a sit there and phone it in type
No.
of business. And so for people who are, who have been there, done that, have achieved some levels of success like you have,
Yeah.
to then give back, it is really a serving.
Absolutely.
So it doesn't go unnoticed, I can say
Thank
that.
you. Thank you. I appreciate it. I appreciate it.
Mm-hmm.
You know, one of the things, and we can wrap it up with this one. I sound like I'm hosting the show. I'm sorry.
You got a better voice, man. You should be. You dress
you.
better.
Thank
You got a
you.
better voice.
Well, I teased it a little bit in talking about Dan Gilbert, but I believe that great leaders grow and then give back, right? And I just mean this historically. When you look at J.D. Rockefeller, I remember one of the first autobiography, or the biography rather, that I read was him, and how he took his money and he invested in biomedical research, right? A doctor came to him because, I hate to say it in this way, right? But folks in the South, they seem kind of slow, right? And the doctor said, I think what it is there's something going on with the ringworm, right? And so Rockefeller was able to fund that therapy, or fund that biomedical research and change the course of medicine, and eradicated ringworm in the South. And then, of course, he goes on to fund education. Spelman College, which most people don't know, it's an HBCU, and it's named after his wife. And so Ted Turner, I remember when Ted Turner, this was years ago, he criticized Bill Gates because Bill Gates wasn't giving back, right? And that was way too early, because Bill Gates was focused on the business. And then again comes this period of giving back, where he and Warren Buffett have created one of the greatest philanthropic organizations in the world, right? You've got McKinsey, Scott, Jeff Bezos' ex-wife, has given over $1 billion to education. And so what I've recognized over time is the best sources of change have come through business leaders who give back, right? And I say that from this perspective, right? You had someone on, who was that? Maybe that was Ingmar, who talked about this hiring folks second chance.
Yeah, he's a second chance organization. I called him
Absolutely.
we had a young man that came through a
Yes.
mentoring group that or a men's group that I belong
Yep.
to, where one
Yep.
of the gentlemen was mentoring this young man, and he had a pretty heavy criminal background,
yeah.
and he needed a chance to get back on his feet. And so
Right.
I knew some other people, who were in more regulated industries that could not hire
That's right.
that person, and so Ingmar, he says, "Oh yeah, we're a second chance organization. We'll give a chance."
Similar to up in Ann Arbor, Zingerman, Ari, and Paul, they're the same way. And so now imagine, and I think you mentioned in that particular case it didn't work out long term, but imagine if someone has a need, right, and they're looking for employment, how long would it take them to go through the government or political channels?
Sure.
Versus, hey, this was handled in a phone call or two, right? And so I really feel like business leaders, one of the primary outcomes of growing something exceptional is that you have the opportunity to give back, right? If someone had met me when I was earlier in my career, found out all these difficult things that I had gone through, right? The best place for me to go is go to a business leader. Hey, give me an opportunity to prove myself.
Well,
Okay,
remember
I got you.
Anthony talking about it. Well, you mentioned the who, not how.
That's right.
And
Dan
then
Sullivan.
you remember,
That's right.
Anthony coming to town, and
Yes.
he started with that first meeting. I don't remember what the gentleman's name was.
Oh,
That
absolutely.
was the first person, and that was the linchpin who then
That's right.
introduced him to the next
Next
person,
person,
introduced him to the
next
next person.
That's right.
So the who, not how is
Critical.
it's very critical.
Absolutely.
I mean, it's how I think everyone grows as a business leader is to surround themselves
Absolutely.
by the right people, and
That's right.
make sure that you're living clean too. Right? So
Absolutely.
you don't burn those bridges, and you don't do things that
That's right.
that you shouldn't be doing.
That's right. Character and competence. Those folks will hold you.
Yeah.
And that's one of the things, too, we're not going to delve into a political conversation, but when you have all of these different programs, you've got DEI, and this year and next year it's Black Lives Matter, and all of these things, those things come and go. What does not change is the best thing to do is to provide an opportunity for folks to prove themselves. The best place for that to happen is through good old American enterprise, good old American business, right? And so while even as in building my group, I'm looking for diversity, male, female, all the different minorities. But at the same time, the expectation is when you are successful with your business, you're going to look for a way to give back. Because waiting for politicians is just going to take a generation or three. You know,
Yeah, they might get around to it. It might be effective, but
maybe
take a lot longer.
So speaking of giving back, and you did talk to me about this. You knew I grew up in foster care, right? What led you to become involved in foster care?
Well, my parents lost a baby when I was in high school.
Okay.
And that then drove them to want to be involved in foster care. They felt like that was their calling. So I have two adopted brothers who came out of that program.
Wow.
And then when my wife and I found out that we couldn't, we continued to have miscarriages, so we decided that we were built for this, and we knew about it. We knew enough to be dangerous, and so we jumped in.
We were built for this. I love it. Right?
We're uniquely qualified, is what I like to say.
Absolutely. That's just awesome. And that's a part of giving back, because what you do here at Auxium, it needs to provide a certain amount of revenues for all of your employees, and also needs to provide a lifestyle for you to be able to reach out and foster parent. So that's to my point, right? We've got to do this. As leaders, as business owners, we've got to do this. We've got to be successful.
Well, and I think, we have opportunities too to do things before we reach certain levels of success as well. And I think that's I think if when I look at like Ingmar, that's what I say is good. Ingmar might be wildly successful, but it didn't take that for him to be able to recognize, hey, you know what? I hired somebody who had a little bit of a past.
That's right.
Who was really successful with, what did he say, 20 or 30 years that one fellow's been with him. And had he not given that opportunity, it wouldn't have benefited him either. But what he's done generationally to disrupt and interrupt that pattern of that downward cycle is huge. So I think that's great. But I think we have to start that stuff before the money is there.
Come on, that's a good point.
So
absolutely right. And business gives you that opportunity. And this is even a story from growing up. Went to high school in the east side of Detroit, and one of my good friends ended up going to jail for a long period of time. And when he came out, a business owner gave him a chance, right? The guy who ran a printing shop, and he gives him this huge manual, and he tells him, hey, go take this manual, go learn how to come back in 2 days, right? And he had been in jail for about 20 years. So what he did was not a minor thing, right? And he went, and in 2 days, he said, in 2 days I didn't have it memorized, but I knew it well enough to be able to do the job.
We had those many years to learn how to read.
How to read, that's right, exactly right. How to memorize, that's right. And so, but then he went from that job to another job, to going back and finishing his bachelor's, and then went and got his master's from Wayne State. And now he's leading a nonprofit organization that helps other returning citizens, as they call it, to go back and get their education. But that all started because a business owner says, okay, I can see what you've done. The fact that you're here, I'll give you a chance to prove yourself, right? And that to me is just so critical.
I remember even just hearing I can't remember the guy's name, the pastor who runs Grace Centers of Hope.
Yes,
he was telling stories of the first guy that really helped him with the biggest donations.
Yeah.
Was a business owner who was doing I think he was in the demolition business or something. I can't remember. Yeah. But nonetheless, he says, hop in my car. And he drove him over to some building and says, hey, can you guys use these? He says, we can't use them, but we can sell them.
Come on.
And so that was one of the ways that they started into their stores. And so, as business leaders, we have these unique opportunities to see into these opportunities that are just not visible to everybody. Well,
that's right.
Well, it's not even vision. It's just that we're exposed to it by virtue of being in it. My old boss used to say, you're in the occasion of sin, right? Bad things happen, or good things can happen. When you're in this occasion of being exposed to all of these opportunities, and that's why we wanted to do this podcast. Because I get to meet all these unique people who are doing crazy good things and big things, and I thought, let's share it with other people, right? I agree. And I think that's part of what I'm hoping, everybody finds a value in.
I agree. I agree. And on that last one, I remember here, even locally, Mitch Albom, of course, who we know as a sports writer, he's got two businesses that went back to get his MBA, and those two businesses are specifically designed so that all the profits go to charity, right? He's got a Detroit water ice downtown, and over in here locally in the mall, he's got brown bag popcorn, right? And that's specifically designed to give back. So you're right, those business leaders, you have those unique opportunities. Absolutely. Thank
Great.
you.
Well, you had told me the other day there was a few business leaders that have really impacted you. So why don't we wrap up with some of these leaders who have
Yes.
impacted you,
Yes.
and then we'll break until next time.
All right, sounds good. You know, I just thinking back over, and because this also relates to, you know, being in a peer group, thinking back to those people who have impacted me the most. And I think the very first person, I remember my very first boss, right, that was really impactful. Her name was Margie Henwood, and she was a straight shooter, as we say, right? So I'll stick with just her, but I can remember this was when I was doing IT. So I've done programming and all of that kind of stuff. I was doing IT support at the time, and she calls me in her office, and she closes the door. So you know there's going to be a difficult conversation, right? And she's really direct, and she says, "Pete, why are you supporting that customer on that product?" Right? This is a straightforward question. She had told us previously that when customers come in with this particular issue that we're not supposed to support them, right? And I looked directly back at her and I said, because the sales team sold that product. So I can ignore that customer, and that will leave a very bad taste in terms of the reputation of this company, or I can take time away from another customer that some of our other reps can handle, and I can service that customer. But the root of this is our sales team sold this product. And she twiddled her fingers, and she's like, "You did the right thing." You know? And what I appreciated was the fact that she was willing to hear me out. And if I was wrong, she was going to tell me, right? But willing to hear me out, willing to engage me in that fashion, and then willing to allow me to go around her rule because it was the right thing to do. And so I think that we all have in our lives, we have some leaders or some bosses that have impacted us, right? And those lessons and stories, I remember I've taken time to write down the particular lessons and stories that I've learned from great leaders. And that's one of the things that we're talking about, right? And how other people, we've listed off these different names because they have stood out to us and they've made a positive impact. You are seeking to have a positive impact on the entrepreneurial community with this podcast. So thank you for that.
Thank you. Well, thank you for being here.
Absolutely.
Thanks for sharing your story.
Absolutely. Appreciate it.
I think we've definitely hit business, we've hit life, we've hit technology, and transformations.
We hit them all.
I think our job here is done.
Can I get more water for that?
We'll give you one more water
One
for
more,
that. Yeah.
One more.
Maybe we'll give you one when you come back. Oh, that way we've got some bait to get you back here.
I love it.
Okay.
Well, thank you, man. I
Thanks,
appreciate
Pete.
that. Thank you for having me.
All right.
Appreciate it.
Have a great one.
I will. Thank you.